Lights, camera, action.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the We Impact Show Season 4. Guys, I hope you guys are having a good week and enjoying winter. Winter is coming to the UAE, and I feel like it's going to rain soon. So you guys are going to enjoy, the hoodie season, the chai season, where, we're all huddled up together just watching the rain. Fingers crossed we get the rain. Fingers crossed we get the rain. So today's episode is quite interesting because we're going to be talking about sustainability. We're going to be talking about the environment. And we're going to be talking about a really, really, really cool research work one of the guests has today. So our guest is Alka Sathyan, an alumni of the Westminster School, and an individual I met at EEG, which is last year, a year ago, and now she's on my show. Oh my God, I am so excited. Alka, welcome to the show. How have you been?
Hi, David. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Like, honestly, I can't believe we're doing this episode. Like I said, guys, EEG was a year ago. EEG is the Emirates Group, environmental group, where it's an organization which focuses on the welfare of the environment within the UAE. It's a nonprofit. And we met over there during our public speaking contest. Like, Alka, that was quite a while back, and you guys won first place and we were second place, and then we had our shoot of fame with Ed Arabia after that, right?
Yes. I actually can't believe it's been a year now. It's moved so quickly. But yeah, it was a year ago, and EUG does such amazing work. It was a brilliant opportunity to be able to present what we think would be great solutions and actually listen to everyone else's ideas also. I think that's a great way to network, and especially as students, to understand how the environment, how nature is seen from different perspectives. And that was awesome.
That was definitely the best thing about it. Plus, I also have to give shout out to the catering service at ETR Middlesex. The food there was top tier. So, Alka, for our viewers over there, could you give an introduction about yourself? So, who is Alka Sathyan?
Right. So I'm actually a graduate from Heriot-Watt University. I did my bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering. I'm also proud to say I'm a TEDx speaker. I also love to travel and love food, huge foodie. And I love to explore different cuisines by cooking. And it's one of the ways I experience culture from anywhere. I also am very, very keen about Industry 4.0 and artificial intelligence and how it's affecting practically every industry out there. So that's me.
I mean, wow, guys, I think we can all, we were just all TEDx speaker, just an artificial intelligence, such a foodie. Like, okay, what is your favorite food? What's your favorite culture of food?
Oh my God. It's such a difficult question. It's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child. But honestly, it's any type of food, comfort food. So I'm a Keralite. So mom's cooking is elite for me. And I learned a lot from her. So I guess I don't have a favorite food. It's more about a favorite experience and especially learning different types. And something I do is I just go online and search for recipes. So one of the first things that I did quite seriously was chocolate chip cookies, because there's a lot of science that goes behind it. And I didn't realize it until I started looking at the recipe. And I thought, wow, this is actually quite clever. And there's a lot more that goes behind it than just flour, eggs, and chocolate. So that was very interesting for me.
That's impressive. Like, I didn't expect to go into detail about a chocolate chip cookie. Wow. Guys, we learned a lot. We learned a lot on We Impact, and I'm very happy about that. But Alka, you also did mention that you were a TEDx speaker. That's an amazing news to talk about. What was your topic? What did you speak about?
Right. So when I was in high school, and this is, you don't think about it as the place where ideas actually come up, but it was actually a life skills moral science class that we had. And there were 6 students in that class, I guess, in that period of time. And one of the things we were talking about was third culture kids. So kids that have ethnicity, as in their outward ethnicity, as compared to where they grew up. For example, me, I'm from India, but I was born and raised in Dubai. So I am neither a Keralite, so to speak, in the traditional sense, but I'm not an Emirati as well. I'm completely different. So one of the ways I think about it is the language I speak. So my mother tongue is Malayalam. I don't speak that great Malayalam. I still understand it. I can speak somehow, hold a conversation, but to a limit. The same thing with Arabic. We had to learn it in school, and that's how I understand certain words in some of the language I understand. But in all honesty, the language I speak is English. I consider myself to be English as my first language. So it's a very interesting conversation to have that your passport culture is very different from the place you grew up in, which as a combination forms this entirely different personality and point of view. And that's your third culture. And it was what I had to talk about because in today's generation, practically every student, every child is a third culture kid. Their point of view, their point of reference is completely different from the person sitting next to them, the person in front of them. And it's very interesting from a psychology, a science perspective to think about it that way, because we truly are unique in that sense because we each have a different point of view. And my TEDx speech was about that, as well as how it affects the third culture kid in terms of how they adapt to different situations, how they learn, how they how they exist in the world, in a workplace, in school, and things like that. So that was my TEDx speech.
I mean, that's actually really, really thought-provoking because I did in one of the episodes we did bring about third culture because I am a third culture kid myself because my parents I'm originally from Kerala, and we do at home my parents do speak Malayalam, but I can like you said, I can hold a conversation and I can understand the language very well, but I can't speak that great Malayalam over there with someone and they'll be like, okay, if I go back to Kerala and they expect me to hold like a 5-star conversation with them, I'm just like, guys, can you just switch to English, please? But honestly, the idea of third culture kids, it's something that is really being discussed right about now. Right about now. So yeah, Alka, the thing is, third culture kids, like it's something us, whoever was born in Dubai, like our kid, in our generation, or in people from school, or the people who graduated before, we feel a connection to UAE. When people ask, where is your home? We say it's UAE because we love India, we love the culture of Kerala, everything like that. And people will say that about whichever home state they're from in any country. But okay, honestly asking you, if you were made to go back home to live in India permanently in Kerala, would you be able to?
Yeah, this conversation has come up before, especially regarding jobs. So if I were to go back to India, would I be able to survive? Which is, I feel like I could. I'm very adaptable. But for me, it's a point of a cultural difference. So to me, the Kerala culture is my parents. I've been to India, I've lived in India during holidays. But beyond that period, I have no idea. I would like to think I can, but I have no idea. So like you said, for me, when someone asks me, where do you live? I say Dubai. But then what do you consider home is a whole different question that becomes entirely a philosophical question, which is like saying home is where the heart is. So for me, home is where I'm currently staying, which is Dubai, UAE. But then how do you really define where you come from? So I can say I am an Indian, but I was born and raised in Dubai. So there's no middle ground other than saying home is where the heart is. So yeah.
That I guess we can all live by. I think every third culture kid lives by that. Every third culture says that home is where the heart is because, like we said, home is where everyone, because the friends you meet, the experiences you have, it's so different to like someone who lives in their home country compared to like the interactions between kids. And that's a great topic to have as a TEDx speaker. And which grade was this in high school? Is this?
So it wasn't in high school. So it was in university in my my second year. So I did this talk And for me, it was a milestone. So, like you, actually, I'm a Toastmaster. Well, to be more specific, I was in the Gavel Club when I was in high school. So, for me, it was an experience about being able to open up. It was my communication skills that needed work. I was a very, very shy kid. Speaking was a daunting task. It's the definition of a Herculean task for me. So for me, it was about being able to open up to new ideas, to new people, and just having a conversation with someone and not having to be afraid of what they might think of me or if we might have opposing ideas. It's good to have the conversation. So that's where it started for me. And for with the TEDx talk, it was for me a peak in my public speaking experience. So when I did that talk, it was weird for me because it was the one talk where I felt completely at ease and so calm. Because normally I get very nervous in speaking, but at that moment, it was nirvana. I was completely calm. I was able to get my point across. People seemed to enjoy it. At the end of the session, people had great questions to ask, which I was able to answer. So it was the peak of my public speaking experience.
I definitely think so. Like, I think even like as you said, mentioned as a Toastmaster, you'd want to become a public speaker through that, like the Gavels Club and through my clubs as well. But I think reaching TEDx is peak. Is you can
Yes.
become keynote speaker, public speaker for many corporations and all that stuff. But having the title as a TEDx speaker, as from a Toastmaster, that I definitely see as a peak. And I think everyone who's going to watch this episode will be applauding you when you say that and seeing
Thank
how
you.
far you've come. Because from based on the conversation we have had so far, I would not have guessed that you were a shy person, or because the way you articulate your words, the way you form your sentences, it's remarkable. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
So, guys, that is Alka's small story of introduction of Alka, and we talk about the TEDx, about third culture. Now, I want to bring about your course. Can you give us a bit more insight about your course?
Yeah, so I've always been a science person, and physics, chemistry, math was my basis, even economics. So that was my basis in high school. And I thought, okay, what do I do with this? And electronics, electrical engineering just came up. And it seemed very interesting and very dynamic as a course because it's used everywhere. It's in the phones we use, it's in the air conditioning that we rely on in Dubai. So it was a very all-rounded topic and a field that would go and stand the test of time. It doesn't get old or irrelevant as it would seem in today's world. And it's very interesting and it keeps changing. And I thought this would be a great way to keep learning and it doesn't just stagnate. There's always something new to learn every day. So that's where I started with electrical electronics engineering. And in my first 2 years, it's quite boring because you start with the boring stuff. As in any subject, the foundation seems boring, but it's the foundation, it's the basis for all the innovation you seem to want to do, that you have aspirations to do. But it's the basis. It's once that is solid, everything is fine. So then as I moved into third year, fourth year, it became interesting and you want to learn. And that's how my course evolved as well as I did evolve with it.
I mean, that's something we can definitely bring about because, like you said, standing the test of time, that is something that's really, really important because given how fast technology is adapting we're in the technological revolution, but the most groundbreaking fact I've seen is how fast and how capable humans are in adapting to technology. Because when you think about, like, this is the one example I live by and I see the progress. The first flight was around 1920, the first flight, the first man with the Wright brothers. And almost just 60 years, not even 60, 40 years later, people were putting man on the moon. So technology is adapting as fast as thing, and having a job or studying in a field that stands the test of time is super essential because you're an essential part of society. What did you say?
Yeah, it's true. It's it's knowing that you were part of the innovation. That's satisfying. You were part of something that would be considered historic and something that people will use for time to come. So that's very important.
Definitely. And you did mention about you are interested in AI and Industry 2.0. What is, or 4.0, I'm sorry, what is that? Because of the expo, how excited are you for that, the launch of AI and the importance of it into society?
Very excited. Very interested to know the different things that people come up with. The sheer ideas. It's not even the fact that people have built a prototype or anything, that it's been made into a physical object, but the fact that people can think in this way, that seems very out of the box and is something that is practical, that can be used by anywhere from the everyday person all the way to someone who is an expert in the field. And that's brilliant. The scalability of the idea is revolutionary. It can be very, very small, but the fact that they come up with the idea itself is enough. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about AI, is that there are rules you have to follow, and at the same time, within those rules, there's so much space to move around, to be creative, to be outside the box. And it's really cool thing about AI and Industry 4.0.
I mean, definitely. I think given the faster technology and the integration of AI, I think the one of the more remarkable thing is augmented reality and virtual reality. I mean, the technology, the capability of those two innovations, it's groundbreaking technology, and and that could be a way to, like, prevent it, become more sustainable. Like, companies can become more sustainable using those ideas. And that is something, as a Gen Z, we are trying to work towards, right?
Yeah. And from an AI perspective, you can go anywhere. And that's why my research was based on that. So there's so much to do with it. And it's one of the best ways of becoming more sustainable. And it's a great way to repurpose labor as well, because that's one of the main points that comes up with AI, which is that what about people who are already doing the job? You're planning on removing them out of the equation entirely. So what about those people? And I think it's a great way to upskill people and use the skills that they already seem to be very, very good at and putting it somewhere else. So it's just repurposing the skills that they have and not entirely discarding them or forgetting about them, because they still are an integral part of the process.
I mean, I don't think even in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, the human workforce, the labor force is still an essential part of, regardless if the AI technology or robots come into the frame and they replace the job, because you would need the human experience, you would need the human touch to do that, to integrate. Like let's say one example is the chat box system, right? The chat box in any banks or anything like that. It's having a fully functioning AI robot to fill out your entire queries and all that stuff. I mean, we would not think that was possible back then, but still, having the support team, like the human support team, helping, assisting, making it as fluent, as efficient, upscaling is definitely an integral part. And moving to the next point about your research work, now that is something I am super excited about. And guys, I did mention that was what won first place at the public speaking competition, because we had to launch a sustainable solution for the future, for nature, and how the UAE can potentially integrate that into the coming years. So, Alka, can you give us a bit of insight about your research work you did?
Sure. So my first attempt to figure out what I would like to do for my fourth year project, because it's a milestone in every undergraduate career. When you hit your fourth year, some people even do it in their third year, where they start thinking about what they would like to do. And for me, it was the summer before my fourth year where I was thinking, I want to do something that really pushes me past my own comfort zone, and to do something that really solves a problem. It might not be made in the near future, but I'd still like to present some solution to a problem. And one of the conversations that I had with family and friends, the topic of agrotechnology came up. And it was a physical feeling of something clicking into place when the word came up. And I was thinking, that's such a great idea, because agriculture is the basis of our food and textile supply. It's very important part of the cycle, and adding technology into that. How could I take this differently? How can I take this a step further? And I went on this research binge of what agri-technology means and what problems is the industry facing now, and what are the solutions that people have come up with. And it is completely eye-opening, because you would never think that agriculture is in jeopardy, because we have completely disassociated ourselves from the food supply chain, because we are point Z, not even point B. We have point A is the agriculture, the crop. Point Z is us, and we've completely disassociated ourselves from it. And I think that was one of the other points as well that really spoke to me, which is we don't really think about how the food reaches our table. It's at our table, we eat it, we get energy from it, and it just stops there. We don't think about how it got to our table. And so and I was guilty of that. So when I got into agri-technology, it made me realize how much natural resources we're using for the upkeep, the maintenance of it, and how agriculture itself has had to modernize, how it's had to upgrade itself based on the needs of the people it's supplying. And one of the main points that I found was water. The water used to maintain the fields is exponential. It is taking up so much water, where we assume that the water that we get is endless. There's an endless well sitting somewhere that's feeding all these plants. But that's not true. One of the main points of water conservation is how we treat the fields. And once that comes into place, then we know how to take water conservation forward. And it was quite jarring to see how much water is used to grow a field of plants, and how soon we are to running out of water to fuel those plants. And so aquaponics came up during my conversation with my supervisor, Dr. Senthil Muthukumaraswamy in Heriot-Watt, and we had a conversation of how to be more specific. So the idea was great, but how do you be more specific in a way that it's a practical solution, and not just talking about a broad range of topics? And aquaponics came up. So a student, one of the previous students at Heriot-Watt, Bilal Ajadi, he did his project on aquaponics, and his project got selected for the Expo 2020 exhibition. And it was very inspiring to hear his story about how he did his research, how he came up with his plans, and he's practically doing it in Ajman. And so it was very inspiring to see a real application of it. And for me, it was, how do I take this a step further? And that's where automation and AI came into play. I thought, okay, how would automating this system help people? And let me give you a definition of what aquaponics is for all our viewers and listeners as well. Aquaponics is a combination of two fields: hydroponics and aquaculture. Hydroponics is the growing of plants and crops in a water-based system. So there's practically no soil. And aquaculture is fish farming, essentially. And a combination of these two fields is called aquaponics. Now, aquaponics in its raw form is used in paddy fields, actually. In Thailand, in Kerala, paddy is grown, or rice is grown by aquaponics. So there's a very thin layer of water, and there are small fish that exist within this water. It's its own little ecosystem, and paddy grows this way. So taking this a step further is actually growing plants and crops using fish excrement and fish waste. And it's very, very interesting, because fish waste is broken down in the water. is transferred to the plants either through water, or there are even things called hydrostones, which are placed in the water with the plants. And it's grown that way. And it's said to have amazing yield, and it's completely organic. There's no pesticide, there's no chemical used other than to balance out the water for the fish, because whatever goes from the fish goes back to the plants. So the fish ecosystem has to be maintained at the exact level, or your fish or your plants don't actually grow properly. There's not enough yield. And it reuses 90% of the water in the system. The only way water escapes the system is through evaporation and transpiration. That is water leaving the plants through natural evaporation. Sun hits the system and water evaporates. It's as simple as that. That's the only way water can go up. And so it's quite revolutionary to think about all these things. And one of the things, or one of the problems that farmers said they faced was the fact they weren't able to maintain the fish ecosystem. Already the fish are quite expensive, and it takes certain amount of fish for the system to be viable. And the maintenance of the fish relies on very, very minute details, especially in terms of the water quality. The water they live in is important. So the only way a child grows and is encouraged is through enrichment, through nurturing. Yeah. Same thing with the fish. So it has to be nurtured. Its environment needs to be maintained in order to have the yield you want to have, for the system to be viable. So one of the points I thought was, why not just automate it? Use sensors to automate the system. That way it makes it easier for the farmer to not have to worry too much about the fish ecosystem. All they would need to focus on was whether or not the fish was growing properly, and in accordance to that, whether the plants was giving them the yield they want. And it was as simple as that. And that's where I started. So people have been doing machine learning where the farmer is notified through an SMS system or through an app even, whether there's an issue with the fish tank or the fish system. But for me, it was whether or not it could do it on its own. The system could function on its own completely, but still giving the farmer the satisfaction of working with the system, especially in terms of its plants, because that's the farmer's job. Yeah. They love interacting with the plants, with the fish. So I wouldn't take it completely out of their hands, but enough that they didn't have to worry about the capital they had invested in building and investing in the system. So that's where automating the system came up. And my entire research project was how it can be automated. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, I wasn't able to build the physical structure as much as I wanted, but I did have the computer model made. So on my computer, it sits this very nice looking aquaponics system that I would someday hope to build and automate as well. So it was a very enriching, eye-opening, and a very great experience to do this project.
I mean, I mean, you know, I'm awestruck right now. Like, it is, you know, you thought so much about it. You brought about so many issues that, you know, not only affect the environment, but also the farmers as well, in terms of like, okay, you there? So, okay, you there? I mean, so when you talk about the farmers and the systems you built over there, it is groundbreaking technology, because you know, we assume that, like, because the world is covered 70% in water, we have an endless supply of water everywhere. Just come along, we can take it, and it's not that easy of a process. But I honestly understand, and your technology, your research could potentially impact the farmers in the more positive light. You know, being a part of the system, being part of the work, that is something that is essential to the society. But like, you even brought about the challenges of maintaining the fish, maintaining the wildlife, and that is something that I didn't think of. To be honest, I'm not very smart or like knowledgeable in that regard, and you really, really enlightened us, me included, about this project. And that assisted, I think EEG, moving on to that, EEG was a platform where you could actually showcase it to a wide range of people who can actually take this idea forward. Like you said, your colleague or your classmate who did it previously is presenting it at the expo. I mean,
Yes.
EEG was another platform where you guys won first place based on this technology, this revolutionary technology, right? So how did that go along?
Right. I have to say that I could not have been able to win the competition without them because their ideas were equally brilliant. So one of my colleagues came up with hydroponics in the same fashion. So how does hydroponics affect agricultural systems? And my other teammate had come up with drone technology, swarm robots technology, and how it can be applied in agriculture. So we basically showed how you can grow in agriculture alone. So hydroponics to aquaponics to swarm robots. And it just came full circle with that. It's how technology can be used to improve agricultural systems, conserve water and other natural resources. And I think that was the basis. So something I noticed while I was at the EEG, all three of us noticed this, was that everyone talked about water, oil, and so on and so forth, the basic pillars of climate change. But we came up with something completely different, and we were slightly nervous about that because it was very much out there because nobody's talked about it to that level. And it was agriculture. It was water, but it was how it was purposed in the field of agriculture and how something as essential as water is being used in something as equally essential, which is our food and textile supply. The clothes you wear, the food we eat, everything around us is based off of that. So it was something we were a little nervous about, but we were quite confident that it stood on its own. So we could present this idea and we would be satisfied with what we have done because it's something we have made. These are ideas we have come up with. And it was during our fourth year. For all three of us, this was our research project. This is what we were planning to do in our fourth year. We were attempting to pursue this line of thinking for the entirety of the fourth year. And so we felt quite confident and quite satisfied because it's something we did. This is something we've built or attempting to build. And funnily enough, the EEG was completely spur of the moment. One of my teammates calls me the day before and says, "Did you see this? Why not join it?" And I was thinking, the deadline is tomorrow. Are you sure you want to do this? And she said, yes. We got permission from our supervisor. And for three of us, it was the same supervisor. So we got lucky. And he totally helped us through the process of how we should present our projects. And it was a quick thing to do because we had to come up on the spot with the decision. And we're like, yeah, okay, all three of us are going to do this. We're going to go for it. And then it became about making our presentation that we would finally showcase at the competition. And I honestly can say I would never have been able to do without them.
Yes. Another round of applause, give big support, because thinking back about it, guys, like when you think about it a year back to now, you actually see that's a system, what Alka's research work is and what her teammates put forth connectively, that is something that is achievable within the next year or the 2 years or 3 years maximum within this expo period. It is something that is actually viable and that can make a difference to the economy as a whole. Anyone studying business, anyone studying marketing, this is something that can actually impact us positively. And that is the essentialness. And that is why I wanted to bring Alka to this show, to showcase her technology, her research work, which can make an impact to the world. And as a youth, it's even better because, we Impact is connecting the youth. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the other presentations at the event? Because I remember someone coming up with a smart home system, which was also their project. And I thought that was really awesome because they were able to build it, they were able to test it, and that was so cool to watch.
I think
Do
that
you
was
remember that?
I think that was from Curtin University because I was still Curtin or Murdoch University because again, the level of, when you think about the environment and you think about an environment competition, you don't think you'll have a lot of creative ideas because, sometimes you feel it's the same old save the trees and all that stuff, that type of idea. When you go into such detail and you realize a group of students can think in outside the box and make sustainable and viable applications which actually work in the field and they can test it out as prototypes, you're just wondering, we're in good hands. We're like in good hands. There is a bright future ahead of us, regardless of all the bad news that's happening. There are people who are interested, and as Gen Z, it is something that we deeply, deeply care about over here.
Yeah, it's true. And something else that was that came up during my decision on what I should do for my research project was I wanted something actionable. Like, can you actually do this? It's not just the speech about how climate change is affecting our world and the basic things that come up with it. It's important for people to know those things, but at the same time, I think I've grown out of that stage where I understand the theory of it, but can you actually do it? And that's where, for me, the term actionable sustainability came into place. And it became full flourish at the EEG competition when I saw people actually doing this. These are students who've come up with ideas that can be implemented in today's world. You could test it today and roll it out in the next 5 years.
That's the best part. And to be honest, when you think about it, 5 years is not a long time. And given the advancement of technology, it is remarkable that we can think of an idea today. And like you said, within the 5 years, you can see it fully function. You can walk the streets of or any of those farms and you see, wait, that is my technology happening over there. And it was just 5 years ago, I thought of an idea like that. And that's something which is essential. That is something that we need. And we live in a country, thank God we live in a country, God bless this country, that who is so passionate about the environment, about being sustainable, about going green, and where we have so many avenues that we can, let's say, what's the correct word? Publicize, celebrate that. We can do that about the technology, and people are celebrating that. And I think, Alka, another thing I saw in your profile was the Hutton Series. You were a panelist over there. You were on the final series. That's an amazing accomplishment. But to the viewers who's not that familiar with the Hutton Series, can you give a bit of insight what it is about and what it meant to be that?
So the Hutton Series was actually hosted by the Panmure House, Adam Smith's Panmure House in Edinburgh, Scotland. So they do lecture series and series like the Hutton Series that talks about innovations in science, economy, and humanities. So, and they want it to be innovative and actually implemented or implementable in society. And we did not think that our EEG talk had such great reach. Honestly, we did it for ourselves. We wanted to just try something new. And at the core of the EEG competition, it was a public speaking competition. So when we got the email, we were completely thrown. We did not know what to do. We were all texting each other on our WhatsApp group. Did you see the email? Did you see the email? Someone wants us to be on their panel about sustainability. It was completely mind-blowing to us that someone from Scotland would actually want to include us in a conversation. And the best part about it was their other panelists are people who are in the industry. These are doctorate students, they are professionals in the sustainability world, in the field of business, economy, and it was really awesome. And the Hutton Series itself was about climate change. So it was, the entire series was talking about the effect of climate change and sustainability in the field of business, in the field of science and technology. And they wanted to know from a concerned citizen point of view, what does sustainability and climate change mean to you? So it was comprised of 6 total series. And at the end of each series, there was, or each session, there was a report that was formed that compiled all the main important points that we had spoken about as panelists. And a compilation of the 6 reports will be sent to COP26, will be submitted for publication. And that was just an amazing opportunity to be part of that. Even in the smallest way, to be part of COP26 is brilliant. And to be considered at the level of the other panelists of Hutton Series was just amazing opportunity to talk to other people, see what their ideas are, what their perceptions and perspective of sustainability is, and how they're implementing it in their fields. So, for example, one of the panelists in the first series was the CEO of NatWest Bank, and she was talking about how sustainability affects the banking world. And for the first time, I was hearing this particular topic about ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. And these are things that people look at in terms of stocks. So as a business, are you following these values of ESG? Does it protect the environment? Does it protect society and social values? And does it protect governance, as in people's access to the government? And it was so cool to see everyone just talk about it passionately, but also how they've implemented it, which was completely eye-opening for me. I did not know that it was to this scale. I knew that it was happening everywhere, but the scale of it was incredible to watch.
Yeah. Oh my God, that just sounds like, that seems like an experience you'll remember for your entire life, because the scale, the people you meet, the networks you build over there, the connections you gain. I mean, you're talking to different professionals across the world. You're not talking to some limited to one country, one geographical location. Yeah, like you said, the CEO of NatWest Bank, I'm just so shocked. And ESG is something really, really essential. That's something we're taught even as business students, how if you are going to start your own company, if you are going to work in a company, you should consider these factors. If you are going to invest, that is something you should be interested in. And the Hutton series probably did provide you guys the best platform for exposure in that regard.
Yes.
You can,
yes.
When you go out or talk anywhere, if you do ever conduct another seminar or a speech or anything like that, this can be a point of listening to other people's perspective and formulating to your own, right?
Yes. So, for example, one of the panelists for my session, which was the session 4 of the Hutton series, there was a woman called Lara Funk, and she is a PhD student at the Heriot-Watt University, and she talked about the seafood supply chain. That's her area in PhD studies, and I thought that was so interesting because I remember reading about fish farming and how it's affecting ecosystems and how it's affecting climate change, and that she is doing it from a supply chain perspective is quite interesting to me. And that was amazing. And there was another panelist named Kelly McBride, and she is part of the Democratic Society in Edinburgh. And what she was talking about was truly incredible. And I thought the same thing, which is involving everyday people in the conversation of sustainability. So when you make a policy in sustainability, it affects you, it affects me, and we are everyday people. So our opinion matters, because if you bring about a policy that suddenly affects us, but we had no say in it, or at least there was no input into the decision of how it would affect us, which is important. And that was really cool to talk about and discuss.
Yeah, definitely. That is something that we should all consider about, integrating different people's opinion into that equation, then making a decision on that stuff, because everyone's voice counts. And on the topic of sustainability, I think we're bringing up to the last part of our session. Okay, I just have this question. Do you think sustainable living, all right, is a realistic expectation?
I think it is, but like the coronavirus, of how we beat it, it's up to us. We have to take the first step in saying, consciously, actively saying, I am going to change my ways. So I'm going to be very honest. I also find difficulty in doing it. So we live in the UAE, and it's a very, very hot country. So one of the main points for us is the air conditioning. And air conditioning is a very, very significant factor in climate change. So, okay, turning off the AC for periods of time. It's very small step, but it's a small step towards something bigger. So it's termed as big ticket items, which is flying sustainably is one of them, or flying to places that are sustainably conscious. And we'll get there, but we first have to work with the small stuff, which is living sustainably within our apartment, within our flat, within our house. And as they say, it starts from within your own home. And once it starts there, you find yourself doing it in different places. You find yourself sustainably sourcing the food that you eat. And soon it'll become sustainably traveling, whether it be a car, whether it be international, domestic travel through airplanes. It will snowball into big ticket items, but we first have to start small. And it's one of the things I mentioned at the Hutton Series, which was we live in this little bubble, and then we assume that whatever we do in this bubble does not affect the outside world. But that's not true. What we do in this bubble does affect the outside world. And being conscious of that effect is a huge part in taking the first step. And that also means talking to people. And that's where climate literacy comes in. And so I guess is that your first exposure to sustainability, which is just cleanup drives and people coming and talking to you about climate change and stuff like that? Is that your first exposure to it?
I would assume so, because in school we were taught from like a younger age that, I'm sure you remember the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. I think that was my first exposure of, people coming out and telling that, we need to make a change. And moving on to that, like Westminster School, our school has made leaps and bounds when it comes to that, right?
Yes. So I was just talking to my mom the other day, and she was saying, and I can see it in the way they deal with it as students. And these are high school students we're talking about. They are between the ages of 14 and 17, 18. And they are coming up with incredible solutions. And these are solutions that can be implemented today. Like you can give this solution to them, they will build it today, they will implement it, and it will work. You can see marked change, you can measure the change. And what was even more incredible was the school involved the primary students as well. So we're talking about 4-year-olds all the way to 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, coming up with what I would say is incredible ideas. You would never think, or you underestimate these kids, these primary kids. We underestimate them and we think, yeah, they're too young, they don't understand what's happening. But they do. And one of the solutions they came up with was a sustainable meal plan in school. So how do you sustainably eat within the school? Sustainable diet was what they termed it as. And I think it's very smart. It's again, very on a large scale, it seems quite small, but for a student of that age to come up with that solution, it's incredible. And then you watch as they grow, they come up with multiple ideas and they just keep building and building and building. And they actually want to do this. They have the initiative and the drive to want actual change. They're no longer satisfied with just sitting and saying the 3 R's. They're no longer satisfied in repeating those things, no longer satisfied with just stating what climate change is, how you can be sustainable, turn off the lights, turn off the AC. Stuff, they're no longer satisfied. They want innovative change to actually be there, implemented. And it's wonderful to watch their curiosity and their intelligence just show. And it's basic curiosity and wanting to be involved in this process. And they recently had 3 different conferences where they spoke. So one was about sustainable fashion. The very first one they did was called Green Vogue. And it was just sustainable fashion. But the research that these kids came up with was in depth, was real, and they were really interested and passionate about it. And the next one they included all students across the school. to come up with different solutions. And they also included different schools. So Winchester, they included, and they came up with really good ideas and the collaboration. So it was not, this is my school, this is your school. It was, we have a common goal, which is coming up with a sustainable idea that can be implemented within our schools. And another solution they came up with was the mangrove forest, which is essential in UAE, which is a huge part of the ecosystem in the UAE. And how water can be conserved there was wonderful. And the latest one they did included international people, so industry leaders and international. And one of the speakers was a 14-year-old girl, Vinisha Umashankaran. And she came up with one of the most interesting ideas, especially for age. And I keep bringing up age. It feels like ageism, but it's not. It's just the fact that they're exposed to such incredible sources of information and they come up with the stuff on their own. Yeah. And Vinisha came up with, do you remember the iron carts in India?
Yeah.
So on the streets, right? So she came up with the way that it can be sustainably done, which is instead of using coal, you solar power it electrically. And I was thinking that's mind blowing. Like, who else comes up with these ideas? And she's won multiple awards. She is one of the youngest people, I think, to win such awards and get such exposure. So everyone can see how she's coming up with these ideas, and it inspires other kids to do it as well. To say, I can also do this. I can totally have this awesome idea and just express it. It can be a complete failure. It can be wrong, but attempting to expose yourself to such ideas, whether it be bad or good, previously done, it's fine. But having the interest alone is enough. It's a good start. It's a spark that ignites the fire, and it's enough. Having that interest can take you anywhere. I think it's really cool.
I mean, when we talk about, like, I think you did mention the fact you don't want to sound like it's ageism and all that stuff, but you think about it, because it's a question that debates come every year. It debates that, can we change the sustainable living? Can we change the sustainable operation? Is it possible? Can we switch our lives? And I'm glad you really did mention the fact about in UAE, you talk about the AC. That is an essential part of living over here because it's really, really hot over here. But that is a small step, but there are so many different ways. Like you brought about the things about school, like the Green Vogue, the conferences, and these are the meal plans, the diet plan. These are kids, way young, because I'm 100% like, okay, I won't say 100% because, the world's a very big place. Like they say 90% or 80%. When we were that age, we weren't that aware. We weren't that socially aware of how big a change can be in terms of the environment, how to save the environment. And when you see kids, primary school kids who are like 4 or 5, maybe 6, 7, making these changes, that when they get into a position of where actual change can be implemented, they have the backing, they have the knowledge, they have the understanding of being sustainable, of being change. And that is something that's the most remarkable thing for me, I assume.
Yeah, so something else is we have to give credit to the teachers and the supervisors in the school who encourage this to the extent of allowing them to speak on such forums and express their ideas this way. So at a primary level, they're given the platform to speak, just come up with the idea. And then when they hit high school, they're given tools to delve deeper into their idea, where they come up with actual parts to the idea, moving parts to the idea. And then when they hit university, they find ways to implement it. And it's no longer just one side of it. So for example, in my case, it's no longer just an engineering perspective. It's how can it be built? How can it be marketed? And how in a business perspective, this works and how it can be implemented full scale in the market, in society. And it's an evolution that happens, and they're fully engaged in the process. They're fully aware of how it works. And they themselves build it. They have the satisfaction of saying, this is my creation. I took it to this level and I would like to take it further. And the curiosity, the engagement is encouraged. And that's really nice. And it's kudos to teachers for encouraging it to this level. So yeah.
100% for all the viewers, all the teachers who watch the show, who could be exposed to the show. We give both Alka, me, and every other guest who just give their undying support, appreciation for that segment, because you're bringing about the biggest change. You are molding the future leaders into this change, because like I said, this climate change is a real big problem and global warming is an issue, but having, like you said also, Alka, the young kids make the change, want to make a change, and see that there can be sustainable difference. And you gave a full time lapse as well about how it is working out like that. We know we have chance, we have hope that it's going to be a great session over here. And that brings us actually to the end of our segment with Alka Sathyan. Oh my God, Alka, how did it feel? I think this your first podcast interview. Like, what did you think of this experience?
Yes. Yes, it is my first podcast experience, and I thought it was amazing. So I heard about your show, We Impact, and I thought it's really cool that you're actually talking to different people like this and getting new ideas from everywhere. And it's so cool because podcasting is slightly underrated actually, but it's such a treasure trove of information, ideas, and people. And what you're doing is incredible, and I'm so honored to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me.
No worries at all. I'm sure I'm super glad to have you on the show. I'm sure the audience would love this episode. Plus, and now you're officially part of the We Impact family. You are officially part of it. So when you do get it now, you'll have paparazzi following you, like, oh my God, Alka Sathyan, We Impact show. When NBC or like, this is a mantra I do every episode. I do say when NBC, Sony, or any of those major TV networks, CW pick this up, everyone's going to be a part of that stuff. And
Awesome.
I am honored to have you on the show. I had a great time over here. We learned a lot. This was like one of the most informative sessions, one of the most productive, informative sessions I had. And I can't wait and wish you nothing but the best in the future endeavors. Like, best of luck, Alka.
Thank you so much, and wishing you also all the best, and enjoy university life. I'm sure it'll be awesome, and I'm sure you'll do great things. Thank you.
So guys, that was Alka Sathyan. I hope you guys had a good time and hope you enjoyed this session as much as I did. Can't wait to see next episode. We have a lot more guests coming on board. So take care. See you guys next time.